Hi everyone, I am Rajkamal. Welcome back to the brand new series of AI product engineering. And in continuation to that, today I am going to talk about even more advanced concept which comes under Docker. So today I'm going to talk about Docker Nginx, which is also known as Nginx, a reverse proxy manager, which is very essential, very important if you are a working professional or you are fresher and you want to create a full-fledged dockerized application product, right? So guys, without further delay, let's get started. All right, so let me explain you with my blackboard so that you can understand the underneath architecture, which is pretty much very essential, very important. All right, let me use yellow color. So guys, if we talk about a full scale production grade system, which is underneath, we are using Docker containers to run it independently and with the help of and developing suppose front end and back end features, services, and how this communication are being made, who is the middleman, middleware, which is enabling those communication flawlessly between front end, back end, and even AI services or a database or cache system, right? So let's figure it out one by one. Let's break it down, I would say. Okay, so here will be, suppose uh, there is a application with I would say front end and back end as of now to start with, right? So that you get the clear picture how things works. So once you're able to understand front end back end component, how they are interacting underneath, so that we can scale further with adding more components like DB part, even caching system, and even AI services. Okay, so that is the whole idea, front end back end. So there will be client who is going to use this application or end users, or let me clear you, in our case it is browser. Okay, so Google Chrome, suppose it's a chrome, it's a Chrome browser. Okay, which will be through which we will be making the request. And whenever we are making requests, so there is a in general 80 port number, 80, at which it is also known as a internet port, through which those requests will be made to the application, right? So this is the browser or client, I would say, and then this request goes to the nginx web server. Okay, nginx, this is, I would say, a proxy manager. There is multiple name, I would say. Not even proxy, it is a reverse proxy manager. Okay, and even in continuation to that, when I will reach to the implementing end-to-end AI system or AI products, which will have front end, back end, caching, DB, AI services, everything. There I will also help you understand how we can use nginx as a load balancer as well. Okay, that will come in future videos. But just for your understanding, I would say this is a middleware layer to make the communication happen, because this is the place that is serving, that is listening at port number, 80. Okay, whatever the request will be coming at port number 80, it will listen, accept those requests, and whatever the routes we have defined inside the default.conf file. So these underneath there is a default.config file where we define the all the routes, and that will be visible to the outer world, not the internal implementation where exactly in which server front end is running or back end is running, in which port is running, right? Whatever the route we have defined for the external world, those things only be visible to the outer world. That's how we are securing our system as well. That is a pretty much important aspects. Okay, guys. Otherwise, anyone or everyone, they can come and hack our system. So that I mean, the security will be concerned there, and we have to cover that aspect as well as a part of system design. That is pretty much important. So after nginx, whatever the route I have defined, let me just give you the reference so that you are able to connect the dots. You are able to connect the dots, which is pretty much important. Okay, let me go to the project that I have created for you guys. So if you see here, this is the nginx, right? I have written the code for that, and this is a separate component. We'll see that if you see here. So there are three components I have designed specifically for the today's demo: backend, frontend, and nginx. So inside the nginx, which is the reverse proxy manager, inside that there is a file name default.conf. Here I have defined these proxies, this location at this route. My backend will be accessible at this home simple slash, right? It will be uh, it will access our front end component, front end services. So this is what I've given as a part of today's application. So I'm just giving you that reference so that you can able to relate the things. So here I'm not giving the exact server where backend is running, at which port it's running, right? Only this is for the reference of nginx. This will not be exposed to the outer world. What outer world will see? This slash api, right, for the security purpose, so that they cannot crack the system. That is pretty much important. After that, nginx, as I mentioned, the request will be transferred to the respective components. Here I'm talking about, suppose, backend, one of the important component or backend services, let's say. Okay, and then, and this is also is a part of API route that we have defined, and this is a part of this route. So these are the nothing but, guys, let me create this, and then I will use the different color. So this is for the front end services. Okay, let me use the yellow color, and where is my pointer? It's gone. Okay, okay, so I was talking about the routes. So this is nothing but the route. Okay, let me use the different color basically. Why this is not selecting at all? What is the issue? I'm not sure, guys. Let me use the, okay, let me use the different color. So these are nothing but the routes. Okay, this route is defined for backend. This route I have defined for front end. I'm talking about this slash, okay, slash API. So using that route, ng Nginx server, which is a reverse proxy manager, will identify whether the request should be transferred to the backend, it's related to the backend services, or it's related to the front end services. And in and even in the future, I will talk about AI services, DB, cache, more things, right? So, the navigation is happening from the Nginx server proxy manager. Okay, I hope these things you are able to understand. And as I mentioned in some of the previous videos where I talked about networking, so suppose this is running at 8000 port, right? That we have already defined under Docker file. And suppose we have defined this is to running on the port number 3000, right? So uh, the and nginx proxy manager running on port number 80, so port to port communication will happen. The whatever the request is coming to the nginx expected to be received at port number 80, and then with respect to that whatever the request going to the backend, it should be sent to the port number 800, and for the front end, port number 3000. Sorry, this is the 8000. Okay, so I hope this navigation you are pretty much aware about that, and you are able to connect each and everything. That is pretty much important. Okay, so let's jump to the VS Code for the real time implementation. So even I have defined the agenda for that. Okay, so see, as a part of today's session, I will be creating front-end container, back-end container, nginx container. So remember in the, previous session, we were talking about a Docker file. It was with respect to creating a custom image for a custom component. Maybe it will be for the front-end, back-end, and the nginx container. And the project that I have discussed with respect to the portfolio one, that was the front-end container only, right? Here we are just I'm just helping you understand backend container, even one more additional container, nginx, right? And this three all together will be creating a very small but very uh, very much important architecture, because this is the base. On top of that, you can scale and add more container services components as per the project and business need. Okay, and this thing also I have explained you, where with respect to which route we can refer to the front end, and with respect to uh, which route we can refer to the backend component. So slash, only slash for front end, and slash API route for the backend. And these all things I have defined inside the default.config file of nginx server. That is pretty much important, that you have to remember, because that is the central place from where everything is getting controlled, the navigation part. If the request is coming from the client, this is with respect to which route, which component. It could be backend, it could be front end. All right, so as a part of that, I have covered the architectural diagram, nginx configuration, docker networking, each and everything I will walk you through as a part of project implementation. And then I will help you understand from the single URL itself, how can you serve front end and back end both. This is the end goal we want to achieve. Okay, from the single URL, I can hit the back end and front end both, and I will show you, I will prove you how things are uh, I mean working seamlessly. All right, all right, so just jump to the VS Code now. So guys, let me create one by one thing. So for the backend, I have created this folder. Then I have put this app.py file, and I will give you a walkthrough so that you can able to understand that what are the things we can mention. So we are using JSON, OS libraries, and the fast API, which is pretty much important to create this API, then request for the communication between the services, right? And this is how we can define the route or a API within the component itself. So here I'm talking about Here I'm talking about Docker component. So inside, sorry, here I'm talking about a backend component. So inside the backend component, what all function, what all APIs we can define as per the business need, that I have done it. So to make it simple, I have used a read route. Uh, I mean, simply if it will be slash API slash, so it will hit this function underneath and will return you message like hello from the backend, so that you can understand, okay, now I'm able to hit my backend. And this is the starting point. Now what other services, what other function we have defined, right? So I have defined health as well. So the route will be, the route which nginx server will be hitting will be slash api slash health, which will be visible to the outer world as well. But underneath it, it will be calling to the read health method. And what it will return, it will return the JSON. That's why I have used this JSON import, right? So these APIs are returning this hard-coded value. I'm returning. I'm for the demo session, for the demo purpose. I have not created these things dynamically parameterized. It is just for the understanding purpose to make it simpler for you in the first go. Then I have created other function like slash info. I will be returning these details as a part of JSON string, right? Service as a fast API backend, version I have mentioned, endpoint I have mentioned. Endpoint, these are the nothing but the function API that I have defined inside the backend component. Slash I have talked about, where it will reach to the this function and return the this measure. Then there is a health endpoint I have defined, then info endpoint I have defined, then there is a greet endpoint as well. Okay. So I mean, there is a text box as well I have defined, where you can pass your custom string and you can get it the result. So if you go there, so this is what I'm talking about. So here I can pass the custom string, and as a, and when I will hit this greet, this is embedded underneath to the backend component. Okay, and when I will hit that, it will provide the result as a message, hello Rajkamal, welcome to the backend service. Anything you can write it here, right? So that's what this service is doing. Then I have just uh, define an endpoint as a sum as well, like the route will be slash api slash sum. There it's simply taking two numbers and returning the sum only. See, this function I'm talking about, suppose there is a 10 20, suppose there is a 120, so it will result as this JSON string, where it's mentioning a is taking 100 as an input, b is taking 20 as an input, and then sum is returning as a 120. I hope you guys are really excited, and you can see this is this dashboard that I have created for testing these endpoints for backend or from front end. You can see how the things are happening. Hitting from the browser, you can consider this as a end user or client. It will act for as a client only, right? Then the request is going to the nginx. This is the reverse proxy manager for us, a middleware, which will ensure the request is going to the appropriate services or components. Then see what is visible to us, slash api slash, then it should be slash api, then slash sum basically. So it's not mentioning, but I will prove it and I will show it from the by inspecting this page as well. Then it's going to the backend, which is running on the port number 8000, right? Everything is documented and pretty much visible in a very practical manner. I hope you guys are enjoying that session, right? Then there is a docker file. This is a docker file which enable backend service to get containerized, right? So we have defined so many things, like we would require this python image, lightweighted python image, right? Then working directory needs to be created, app1. Then we can copy requirement.txt into that inside the app folder. This is something I have defined, the dependencies a part of this backend development. Fast API would be required, UVCon would be required, and I have also mentioned the specific version, then request, all those things. Okay, and then for the installation, pip install. After that, just copying this app.py from our local to the this container, this backend container. Then I'm asking you to asking Docker to expose this container on 8000. So this is container for backend. So Docker, sorry, the backend container will be running or will be doing networking at 8000 port. Then the command, this is how we can run mention the command execution inside the Docker file on the uvcon app. It will be running app.py file on this local host, this particular port, right? So on this on the local host at this port, it will run the app.py. So our backend will be up and running, right? Hope this is, I mean, you are able to understand end to end with respect to the backend component. Okay, let's talk about the front end. For the front end as well, as a first step, so let me show you, yeah, as a first, let's talk about the Docker file for the front end. Here we would require the Node.js, right, for the enabling the server side communication. And so this is again a lightweighted Docker image only for the node, preloaded node. Then I will be creating this working directory app, then copying this package.json. You remember, guys, for the front end, it will become package.json. However, for the backend, which was Python based, there we are using requirements.txt. Both are, I mean, conceptually, logically, uh, requirements.txt and the package.json are same. We are copying it on the inside the app folder. Then in order to installation for the front end component installation, there is a command npm install that would work, right? However, for the backend, which is the pythonic based, there we were using python pip install, then copying everything which is available local with respect to the front end on the Docker image that is creating as a part of this exercise. And then we are exposing front end on the 3000 port. Then in order to run that this application, front end application, we would require to run npm run dev. Okay, I hope you guys are easily able to grab these concepts, and now you're pretty much confident about building these separate components with the help of Docker file. To give the UI interface, I have created this index.json with the help of Cloud Code CLI, or I have also this chat interface basically. And these are the nothing but AI coding agent, right? So Klein I am using here. Let me click it here and see. I have many this coding agents. So Klein I have used for this development. See, you can see that. So that also you can see, but let me give you a quick walkthrough. So you will go there. These are the with respect to HTML here, and the most important on click, because here I'm creating these buttons. So on click of every button for the health checkup, I'm just creating a button. After clicking that underneath, what it should call, right? Those binding I'm doing here as part of that. Then there is another button for the service info. Then there are another click, right? So click for the API grid, right? This one. Then there will be another button for the calculate sum. It should be there for the calculate sum. So all those things are there, right? So for that, you can take the help of this, I mean, coding agents, and it will eventually make your life easy to create this kind of beautiful interface. But conceptually, you should be able to understand what is your requirement. Then only you can even instruct through the prompts to coding agent as well. That is pretty much important. Okay, all right. So this thing is also covered in the package, which is common, which is as similar as requirement.txt for Pythonic based application. So I have defined all the dependencies with respect to each and every version, and even in the dev environment. in local host, in which port it will be running, how we will be building, right, using next build, how it will be, how it will get started. So in terms of the scripts and all the commands has been mentioned here, and the dependencies, like for the front-end development, there is a dependency on the next.js, react.js, right, for the front end. This is basically, and the React DOM, right? However, for the uh, to make the communication happen with the server side, we are also using Node.js, right? So that is pretty much easy to understand. Guys, let's talk about nginx, which is pretty much important. Let me close other open files. Okay, for nginx, there is one important file, very, very important file, which defines the route basically, which will be visible for the outer world. That's how it just isolate our underneath implementation, the very, I mean, secure details, like on which server our backend service is running, in which port it's serving. Everything we can just encapsulate, and we can just show the route we have defined and which we want to make sense, and it should be very logical. I mean, if you're saying /API, it means, I mean, all the backend APIs should be callable from this route, right? So just while creating this route, you should be pretty much mindful that you are using a certain uh, pattern, right? Some certain nomenclature while creating those routes as well, right? So that will be my advice. But this is the place where this is the place, or this is the meta information which nginx use for its navigation from one service to another service. And then there is a docker file, I would say. It is very simple. Nginx, there is a nginx server. I already communicated, I already mentioned that nginx is nothing but a web server. For that as well, we would be getting available images on the docker hub. We will be pulling those lightweighted images for to enable its power to act as a reverse proxy manager in our case. Then we will be removing basically the existing default.config file available, because when you will be installing nginx uh, image, it will come up with this default structure with default conf file in this under inside etc folder structure. So we will be removing first. Freshly, we will be copying our default.config file what we have created to the same location, because this is the default path for nginx to internally refer this default.conf file. Then it will be exposed on the 80, and this is nothing but internet port where basically clients will be hitting or sending some request, and actively nginx will be gathering those requests and transferring or routing those requests to the backend or front end as per the API calls or route we have defined. Okay, so code wise, I hope you guys are able to understand each and every bit of it, right? So let me show you. I'm just running Docker Compose, uh, okay, this command, so through which it will ensure, because I am just using docker compose file. Let me explain this file as well, because this is something new for you guys. So guys, uh, s- just let me use my blackboard so that you can able to understand it in a better manner. Okay, so let me, okay, all right, yeah, this color will be good. So guys, as you know, these Docker containers are now created and they are live, they are running, right? These these containers backend running, and this front end container is also running. Now there should be, and they have their individual Docker files. Docker file for backend, Docker file for front end, and even Docker file for nginx, right? So image will be built, container will be running, but in order to do it centralized manner, right? Because through the Docker file this will be up and running, this will be up and running, right? So there should be one provision, one system offered by Docker, so that from single file only we can make it run the whole system up and running, right? So there is a concept of Docker compose.yml file. So this config file keep that information, that if this service we need to trigger and make it up and running, so what all other services need to be up and running, so that it can properly serve the whole system, right? So to to make you understand in simpler manner, this is a provision, this is a system offered by the Docker to make whole orchestration centralized manner from one file itself, rather than, because we cannot do it going to the each component level and trigger it, right? That will be the manual thing. And I mean, this is not recommended. That's how we cannot run a big full-fledged production grade system, right? So to cater that requirement, we will be using docker compose.yml file. So in the code as well, this is the file I'm talking about. So if you open it, I've defined some version. Let me just minimize my terminal so that you can easily see like the complete picture. So version I have defined, then services I have defined. In terms of the services, there will be nginx, there will be front end, there will be back end, right? These three services we are running. So three containers will be running as a part of this whole system when it will be up and running, right? So as a part of this whole system run, there will be three Docker containers running underneath, right? Uh, that is nothing but a services in a layman term, or the term which Docker compose.yml file has defined. So for the nginx, it will refer this folder. It will be serving on 8080 for the networking purpose. I already communicated this is the local host port, and this is the where inside the container in which port this nginx will be serving. So inside the container it will be serving at port number 80, and inside the in my local machine it will be serving at port number 80, and it depends upon. So that's what I was talking about. So even in order to run this or make this service up and running, it's pretty much important the backend and front end services is already get started, right? So firstly this backend and front end will start, later on nginx will start, so that it can serve the client request, right? So front end and back end we have defined here. Then respectively for the front end services, for the build it can refer the this front end folder, and for the back end it can refer the back end folder, and it understand I mean it need not to mention explicitly Docker files, because it needs understand under a backend folder there will be one Docker file which it need to refer to build that image and run that container. I hope this explanation you like it and you are able to understand each and every bit and pieces of the whole architecture, right? Now since let me make it big here. Now since I ran this docker compose command, now whole system is up and running. You can see backend is up and running, front end is up and running, nginx front end running, right? And even you can see through the docker ps command, right? What all containers are running up and running. So see these images, and this is the container name which is up and running for the for the front end, back end, and even for the nginx. See the whole name. If you look at, see this image, and this is the name corresponding to the container. Let me show it to you so that you can able to relate each and everything in a more practical manner. So I'll go to the my Docker desktop. This is Docker desktop. Go to the image, right there you can see the images I have created. Okay, so I think there it will be nginx. See, this is the project wise, and underneath it created separate image for the backend, front end, and nginx. Going to the container, so we'll see. Uh, yeah, see, this is the project name, right? This is the project name, guys. Just refer it Docker nginx setup client, right? This is something it's referring here, and under that folder, it spin up nginx server backend and front end. Everything is running, right? Then you need to go here, just click it, see the magic, it's running. Okay, all right. So uh, it's time to check each and every API or endpoint that we have defined as a part of backend, right? Because they are only, I mean, front end we are using for this UI interface, user experience for the interaction, but the endpoint we are going to check all those things we have defined inside the backend. Okay, all right. So click on health. So it's returning status health. Go to and click on the inspect. Ensure you are on the Chrome browser. Then coming to the network, right? Just load it. So in the one load, these many files, right? JS file gets uploaded to render this UI for you. Now, when I'm clicking on the health check, see, it's giving me health API, right? Then when so this is telling you which API is getting triggered. So I have explained you inside this, right? Inside backend, yeah, app.py. This is clicking here, referring this one, and the respective JSON it's returning. Okay, all right. And if I'm talking about the service info. I'm talking about the service info. So it's referring to the this API, and see what is visible to the outer world info. I mean, they are not able to see underneath the actual routes that we have defined for the backend, front end, or our AI systems, right? So that is pretty much good. Then clicking on the greet, it's writing hello euron, welcome to the backend service. I can put my name as well, Rajkamal. Hello Rajkamal, welcome to the backend services, right? And you can see each and everything. Those APIs are getting hit underneath, and all the navigation, all the this communication alignment is happening through the that middleware that is nothing but our reverse proxy manager nginx. That is pretty pretty much important. That is, I mean, there is a one manager who is managing all those requests coming from the client. Then let's test the calculator as well, putting this 100, 200 as a and b value, then clicking on the calculate. See, this API got triggered in backend, and it's returning this JSON, and that's what is expected, right? See, we're returning A, B, and what is some. So, guys, let me come to the agenda. This is the agenda. So I have covered each and everything. I created the mini production architects using the this Docker as a part of today's recording, today's session. Front end container explain you, backend nginx, then API routing, each and everything. Architecture I explain you, nginx configuration file, default.config, Docker networking I explain you, request routing, how the this communication uh, is happening from the nginx to backend and front end. Those routings I have explained you. Then from the browser I explain you how we can make the request and also can backtrack where it's going, which all endpoints it's hitting, under which components those endpoints are present, right? Everything. And from the single URL only, right? You can able to test your front end, back end, each and everything, right? That is pretty much covered, I think, right? And then I talked about this Docker Compose command as well. This is with respect to the Docker compose.yml file, which it refers to make your whole system up and running, right? And then, yeah, we can also see the logs as well. This is also important. If your backend is running, front end is running, how can you just uh, test those things, right? Monitor the logs. So let me do that here. I'm just using front, let's say nginx backend and front end. Sorry, what mistake? Version of please remove it to avoid confusion. No such nginx. Okay, okay, guys. This is the name. I think we need to refer in order to. Okay, all right. Let me see why it's not running. Let me go to the this cell and just docker compose log. It was working. Let me do it. See, it's showing you all the logs corresponding to the backend, right? Similarly, you can go and do it for. Let me navigate to the path, guys, first. Here I am. Then docker compose and then logs -f backend. See, that is also we can track each and every activity happening underneath. See, these logs are coming from where? This is something we are hitting from the front end, right? And this is what I'm trying to explain you from the browser as well. So with respect to these actions, those reactions are coming, right? And whenever I'm hitting something, those logs are getting captured, whether it's related to front end, back end, right? So those are the things. Okay, guys. So guys, hopefully, I have covered each and everything as a part of today's session, and it was very useful for you. And I'm assuming you would have learned something today new. Okay, with that, I'm signing off. But remember, keep learning, keep growing, and keep building together. Thank you.